So hello everyone and welcome to our Thriving Childcare, Social Emotional Health and COVID-19 Guidelines webinar. My name is Heidi McFadden. I'm the Executive Director at Gretchen's House Child Care Center based in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We have 9 centers in Ann Arbor, the whole of Michigan actually, 8 of them in Washtenaw County. I've been in early childhood for over 30 years. And most of that time has been spent at Gretchen's House in Michigan. So I would also like to take this time to introduce the rest of our panelists. Julie, would you like to start?
Sure. So, hi everyone, I'm Julie Robato. I'm a clinical associate professor in the School of Social Work at the University of Michigan. And I am an infant mental health specialist and mentor and have been in the field for 35 years working with families of young children, parents, caregivers, childcare programs, and excited to be part of this group.
Great, thank you. Prachi, would you like to go next?
Hi, thank you. I'm Prachi Shah. I am an Associate Professor of Pediatrics in the Division of Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics at Mott Children's Hospital. And I take care of kids 0 to 6. And when I went into pediatrics, I just wanted to help parents fall in love with their kids. And it's a privilege to be part of a group where everyone else feels the same way. So glad to be with you all.
Wonderful, thank you. And Kate, last but not least.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Heidi. It's wonderful to be here. And hello, everyone. I'm so glad we are together for this time. So I'm Kate Rosenblum. I'm a professor of psychiatry and OB-GYN, but a clinical and developmental psychologist by training. And at the University of Michigan, I direct the Zero to Thrive program, as well as our infant and early childhood clinic. But I think I'll add 2 other pieces to my intro that I don't always include. And the first is I'm a mom. So, I've had kids who have been in childcare, and in fact, one who's a graduate of Gretchen's House. And I also got my start early in my career as a preschool teacher through college and right after college. And that really fostered for me 2 sort of things that I think about right now. One is my love, passion, and commitment to working with young kids and supporting families. And the second is a deep appreciation for the work, because I have never had a job that was harder in some ways than that was. So a lot of respect for both the joys and the challenges of the classroom. So I'm really delighted to be here. And if it's okay, Heidi, I'll actually just take a moment and orient us a little bit here for what we're going to do today. So our hope is actually that we can spend some time thinking together about transitions right now in this period of COVID. And we want to pay special attention, as a group of folks who really think about social, emotional well-being, mental health, relational health. We're going to really sort of focus on transitions with attention to those things in this COVID era. And in COVID, we've had to pay a lot of attention to strategies that help to maintain physical health through social distancing. But what we're thinking about now is how do we also promote emotional health and security, so that really appreciating that while social distancing might be very important for mitigating the risk of infection, emotional proximity is actually really important for little kids who need that for their sense of safety and security, and especially at times of stress or sort of transition. But as we sort of think about this today, I think what you'll hear, and I hope will come across through what we all say, we absolutely appreciate that attention needs to be paid to everyone going through this transition. And so I sort of think about kids going through the transition and their parents going through this transition, but teachers are going through this transition too. And everyone in that mix has different thoughts, feelings, concerns, apprehensions, excitement, all sorts of different kinds of feelings. And questions, So I think today, hopefully we'll have a chance to really think about how we can support kids, support families, but also support teachers and address concerns that everyone might have as we think about this transition. I am going to give a couple of disclaimers. One, I think the governor's office posted some guidelines as of yesterday. I've had a chance to look through them, but not with a fine-tooth comb. And I also want to stay personally in my lane as a child psychologist, not an infectious disease specialist. So I think we'll talk about those things as we understand them, but of course it's going to be important to follow public health guidelines and recommendations as they unfold. And I think if we've learned anything over the past weeks and months, it's that this is a changing landscape. So we have to be flexible in some way and stay open to learning what the guidance is as it comes, because the guidelines may change. So I think we'll share ideas, but ultimately, of course, you're going to want to trust the guidance that you're getting from public health and from your school administration around how to navigate some of the decision points. Ultimately, we really just want to help support you as you support others, because you deserve that support as you navigate this big time. So I'll stop there, if I may, and just turn it back over to you, Heidi.
Great. We did have a slide that we wanted to share with folks who are watching live. There we go, friendly reminders. All of you are in listen-only mode, so if you want to share something with us, you can hover your mouse over the chat button and type us a question, and by the end we will make every effort to answer all of the questions we get, if that's possible. And also, we're being recorded and it will be available after today. So please feel free to share this with anyone you feel it would be helpful to. So thank you. I will just jump in also and add that I spent this week going through those recommendations for centers returning to care. There is a Gretchen at Gretchen's house, and she was on the governor's task force for that. So I was able to look through those, and they are very comprehensive but flexible for centers, which can be challenging to, we don't want to be told what to do necessarily if it doesn't fit our situation, but on the other hand, sometimes it's helpful to have good guidance. But the thing I really like about that form or the list of guidelines is that it informs us of what we need to consider. So make a policy about, and then that's, I think, where a lot of our audience will be seeking guidance today. So I think that's really pertinent to bring up. So with that in mind, I'm wondering, as we look at trying to minimize exposure for children and staff, we're contemplating changes to classroom routines, possibly to the environment itself. And on the other hand, doing that can create some potential emotional outcomes for children and staff who then are separated from people they thought they were going to be with. So Prachi, can you talk a little bit about the need for small groups or changing routines in that way?
Right. Thank you so much, Heidi. So I'm going to give what I'm going to call the Delta Airlines view, the view from 30,000 feet above. And, in this changing landscape, I feel like there are two things that we really hold really front and center. And that's the importance of safety, but sort of thinking about little people, it's the importance of security and the importance of kindness. So while we have to maintain social distance to minimize and mitigate the spread of infection, we want to make sure that that social distancing still maintains emotional proximity so that these little people can feel really safe and secure. And so one of their, as we are enacting some of these different strategies, thinking about what the effect is on little people, that if we put together these smaller groupings to really minimize the spread of infection amongst large groups, it may mean that children can see their friends who they love and who they missed and who they haven't seen in a very long time, and they see them across the playground, but they can't go and play with them. And so how do they make sense of, well, here's my friend, but I can't be with them physically. And so how do we impart to them that while you have to stay physically separate, you can still be emotionally close? And sort of the image that I think about is this idea of, this is in some ways like a social safety belt. So when we are in a car, children are in car seats and they have to buckle up because that's safe. And in some ways, this social distancing and these smaller spaces and smaller groupings are sort of our social safety belt. They are ways of staying safe in a smaller space, but yet at the same time, even though we're buckled in our car seat, we can still see mom and dad at a distance. And so while we are physically in a smaller space, we can still stay emotionally close, even if we're interacting at a distance. Sort of relatedly, one of the things that may need to happen is that drop-off and pickup times may need to be removed from the mix of the classroom so that parents can avoid coming into spaces and creating these large sort of group gatherings. And I think speaking to your points, Kate and Heidi, like this idea of, how do we sort of think about safety and sort of like the good of the many, but while still holding in mind, this idea of like being flexible, and how we do that. And so when I think about little people, and often one of the pieces of advice I give in my clinic is that young children need two roles: be safe and be kind. And so, don't run with scissors, not safe, don't hit your brother, not kind. And so the things that we are doing is we are re-entering this next stage of sort of life, in the midst of the pandemic, is how do we maintain safety while maintaining kindness? And so, so some of these sort of staged and drop off and pickup times is really, under the umbrella of being safe to mitigate the spread of infection, and also being kind, thinking about the good of others, and thinking about the good of the families and our children. We also have to hold in our mind's eye the helpers, so we want to be able to help the helpers and think about, what do teachers need in order to maintain their own sense of personal, emotional safety, and what do they need to be able to be kind to themselves so that their emotional well can be full, so that they can be kind to the little people that they are caring for. And so sometimes we may need to think creatively, flexibly, thoughtfully, kindly about the work structure for our teachers and for our helpers on the front line. And they may need to work shorter days so that they have the time and the space to care for themselves, to care for their families, to replenish the emotional well, so that that well can be a reservoir that overflows to feed the children that they're caring for. So those are my thoughts.
Sorry about that. So you brought up stress, or at least that was the undercurrent that I was hearing as we were thinking about teachers maybe needing to work shorter days and being flexible with parents as well as children. So what kind of things should, maybe clues or red flags, should teachers be looking for? Julie, do you have thoughts on that as far as maybe some stress indicators in families?
Yes. I think it's so important to be thinking about how stress is going to show up for all of us. This is a time of uncertainty, and there's so many things that we don't know. And I think any of us are going to have points where it's going to come out in our behavior. It's going to come out in our sleep patterns, our eating patterns, same things that it does to adults. It can show up in children as well. So I think a few things that I would be thinking about from the child's perspective is they really rely on us to be steady and available, and to be emotionally supportive and a source of sort of emotional nourishing and refueling. And so when they feel they can access us, that steadies them. But for some children, they're coming back, maybe with having had circumstances and experiences that are really challenging to their ongoing sense of safety. So I was talking with a team a couple weeks ago where a lot of the kids that they work with, young children that they work with, have been in foster care and adoption. And the experience of being separated from their child care provider, who's been a source of safety and support, might feel to them like their child care provider has abandoned them, that their caregiver has abandoned them. We can see that for sure in children who have histories of loss before, but we might also see it in some children who haven't had histories of loss, but who wonder where their care, where the person they've come to love went. So they might be coming back in a different state than which they left. And so in that regard, I think childcare providers have the tools, because you're used to getting children settled in. You're used to helping them with separation anxiety. You're used to getting them accustomed to routines. You're used to sort of that falling in love process, right? And there might be an expectation, okay, we've done that, and so we're just gonna like pick up where we left off. And I would caution us to think that we might need to start, maybe not from ground zero, but maybe from like on a scale of 0 to 10, like at 3, right? We might not be starting all over again, but we might have to go back. So some of the things that I would be looking for from the children to let us know that the supports we're providing them might need to be upped would be beyond the first couple of weeks of getting them resettled. If we see children after that 2 or 3 week time point still suffering significant separation anxiety, shutting down, withdrawing, showing aggression towards others, being inconsolable. And the inconsolability, I probably wouldn't even let go for any more than a week, right? Like I wouldn't want to wait two weeks for a child who's inconsolable, who might be telling us this is too stressful. So all the behaviors that we see oftentimes in the beginning, we might see again. And we might just need to shorten our span of time of using typical strategies to say, okay, let's get some additional supports in. So those are a couple points, right? Heightened separation anxiety, heightened aggression or shutting down, being frozen, being emotionally flat. I think those are signals that the children are overly stressed. Difficulty sleeping, difficulty settling for nap time. I think we should probably expect that at first. And then stomach aches or headaches that sort of suddenly pop up 2 or 3 weeks in might be another indicator that the stress has mounted for the child. I would be looking at duration and intensity in terms of markers that this is beyond sort of the resettling period. Some things that I would be thinking about would be, do we need to alter the schedule so some of the kiddos who are having difficulty might have a shortened schedule, if at all possible, for the parent, right? And this is going to be so challenging to navigate what the child needs, what the caregiver needs, what the family needs, all while we're in heightened states of sort of stress ourselves, because it's an uncertain time. So I would echo Prachi and Kate both, that the kindness with which we need to meet teachers, children, and parents, that level needs to be amped right now, because that's what will get us through this. And for people to be gentle with themselves will help them, I think, be gentle with the children as well. So some sources of support. I think that this is going to other states as well. I noticed that some people had chimed in on the post that they were coming from other states. Infant mental health services in your state, Part C services in your state, accessing the intermediate school districts. So if childcare programs need additional sources of support for particular children, finding those behavioral health consultants, and then I'm hoping that we can ramp up levels of consultation and support for teachers, because I echo Kate as well. I think that this work is tremendously challenging, and it might be even more challenging in the days to come.
I would just echo everything that Julie said, and also just sort of reflect that the job of a child, the job of a little person, is to play, make friends, and to learn. And so, because every child is going to have a very individualized response to this pandemic based on their own temperament, their own history of experiences, and then what their experiences were in the time of this stay-at-home order, that transition back to childcare is going to be really informed by a multiplicity of factors. And so I would really look at sort of the threshold of function, sort of guide what stress looks like in a child, because we may not, sometimes behavior may not be the most accurate indicator of adaptation. And so I might think about, if a job of a child is to play, to make friends, and to learn, are we seeing behaviors that are really constricting that child's ability to play? Does this child prefer to be in a corner by himself, or is more clingy with his caregiver? When we think about how do little people learn, well, they learn by exploration and through sort of using their senses and through allowing the expression of their natural curiosity. And so if we are seeing inhibition in the expression of that child's curiosity, inhibition to exploration, to the degree that is allowed with the social distancing that we're trying to, put in place, I think that would be a red flag. And the other sort of idea to hold in mind is that every child is going to be different. And so maybe a threshold or a standard that teachers can hold in mind is, what was the child like before they were in childcare? Sort of what was their temperament like? How did they respond to novelty, engage, and with the teachers and with others? And what are they like now? And so that delta, that change in behavior, if it doesn't get better over time as the child readjusts and sort of falls into a sense of routine, I think that would be something to hold in mind's eye. And then I think as a strategy for teachers is to be able to label the feelings and to label and to be a mirror for the child for what they see. Because the child may not be able to express, I'm scared, I'm lonely, I'm mad because you were here and then you weren't. And so to be able to sort of enter into a reflective space with children to say, I noticed that you look sad, I wonder, and then to try to express what the child might be feeling as a way of putting words and articulating the child's stress when they may not be able to do that themselves.
So I'm wondering if there are red flags regarding parents and the parent stress level. I know the same things. I mean, honestly, I was taking notes on what we might see in children, and I see some of those in myself right now. And I'm guessing that that with families, we will children will reflect what's happening at home and the stress levels, but also what might be some red flags for families that that the adults are having. Maybe they're able to function well enough for the children not to be picking up on that and exhibiting those same behaviors, but are there things that maybe we should be on the lookout for with parents in the first few weeks, or maybe even beyond that if it's going on longer? Does anyone have a thought on that?
Well, I think, I'm so grateful that you're thinking about that, because teachers are such trusted resources for families. Really, you're a touch point for children and for parents. And so when you're seeing that parents are really struggling, you may be the only person who's sort of really taking note of that and has an opportunity to reach out to acknowledge that this is hard, and to be curious about what support parents need. And I think a lot of the things that we want to do to help support kids actually are really about also helping families prepare for these transitions. parents may have a lot of feelings about saying goodbyes to their little ones. And those feelings could really range from feelings of relief at routines that were familiar returning, feelings of worry and fear about infection or about separation, um, missing feelings, that they've been at home with kiddos and now are going back to work and have all kinds of feelings about return to work, and what that means. So it's hard to assume one sort of response, but when we see that parents are having a really hard time with the separation themselves, or with supporting their kiddos, or sort of following guidelines, or expressing strong feelings, sometimes, you know, there may be situations that I can imagine where teachers or administrators might feel like they're the messenger for hard things, and parents might have strong feelings about what it means that schools may close if there are kids who are diagnosed with COVID-related illness, right? Or might have strong feelings about the guidelines that are being offered around masks or drop-off or pick-up. I think what I like people to think about is that just like with kids, where we think that behind the behavior is a feeling, we want to be thinking about how behind the behavior of parents, there's often a feeling too. And what can we do to help parents feel prepared to have information, to feel that the school is going to be really transparent about what they're doing to both keep their kids physically safe and emotionally well, to prepare their kids for that transition back to school and offer strategies that parents can use. I mean, you are absolutely the best experts in how to sort of help kids feel safe and secure. And parents may really feel reassured by your offers to help them to think about how to do that. It's empowering for them as well. So, keeping an eye on parents, checking in, asking how they're doing, and sort of being in that space of remembering if they're having a hard time, it's probably because there are some hard feelings underneath it, and thinking about what information or resources do they need to feel better. I will just add, if I might, for 1 second, and then Julie, it looks like I think you might have something to add, but I just want to say, I didn't introduce in the beginning Zero to Thrive, but Zero to Thrive is the sponsor of this. We're an organization at the University of Michigan that really focuses on how to support families with young children who are struggling or facing adversity. And I think it's safe to say we're all facing and struggling with adversity right now. But we have a lot of resources available. And the resources are things that some of the folks on this call right now have helped to develop, but also we offer and connect you to other really trusted resources. And we have a whole set of sections of materials, infographics, links for parents that they might find really helpful. So, being a guide for parents to find resources that help them to get the information and support they need is another important function I think you can play. So Julie, I'm sorry, you look like you wanted to say something.
No, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I was thinking immediate support, like who can show up and help you navigate, but certainly information and the Zero to Thrive has wonderful resources available. So I'm glad you mentioned that. I think the thing that I wanted to piggyback on was, so we've talked about behavior and we've talked about feelings, right? And then what do children need in those, when their behaviors are indicating they're having strong feelings that maybe they can't give voice to? And Prachi, you raised that so well, right? Like, sometimes our job is to intuit what is going on underneath the behavior and what the feelings are. So, Kate, I was thinking about our Mom Power intervention and about our Strong Roots intervention or your Strong Roots intervention that I get to be part of. But the idea that when children are having big behaviors, it really makes sense to take a pause, to say what might they be feeling, and then what might they need from me. So, and the need can either be for connection, for closeness, for comfort, for words, like you said, Prachi, for these big feelings. I'm recalling a student who we were talking about learning how to put words to children's feelings. And so she was practicing one day with her daughter, and her daughter was having a hard time with transitions. And she said to her daughter, are you feeling frustrated? And her daughter said, what's frustrated? And so this, capturing a child's intense emotions and giving it words can help them calm down. And so I think on that frame, like, what is it that they need from me? Comfort, closeness, words, connection, or do they need me to delight in their exploration, to support, Prachi, you were talking about the capacity to play and explore. Do they need somebody right there saying, look how strong you are, and sort of help them recapture that sense of competency that might have either been bolstered during this time? They might actually be missing their parents and missing that connection with their parents. Or, do they need to be reminded of their strength and their capacities? So I think we want to keep in mind the behavior is as need, the feeling, and then what do the children need from us in those moments? And then what do the caregivers need? Heidi, you have a big task, right? Holding the caregivers study. Yeah.
To sort of piggyback on what Julie said, I think about this idea of the parallel process. So what the parent needs to provide for the child is very often what the childcare provider may need to provide to the parent. And sometimes the behavior can be paradoxical. Sometimes we act and say and do things, but it's not really what we mean, and it's really not what we need. And so, like, an example of that, is a little person who has such big feelings and pushes, tries to push a parent or a teacher away, saying, I hate you, I want you to stay as far away from me as possible. And they don't really want you to stay as far away as possible. They're just saying, I have really big feelings and I don't quite know how to manage this. And I remember, and I learned this from a childcare teacher, and I will always remember this, that when a little person said, I want you to stay away and I don't like you and I hate you, the teacher said, you can push me away as far as you want and as far as you can, but you'll never succeed because your arm is just not long enough. Your arm is not long enough to push me away forever, and I am right here. And I'm here to help you manage those big feelings. I'm here to help you feel safe. I'm here to help you stay safe. And when some of those big, angry, hard feelings, are a little bit less, and I can help you through that process, I'm here. So I think that's part of the big message of that sense of emotional security, emotional consistency. And while we're providing that for the child, parents may have lots of big emotional strong reactions as well, and may bring some of that negative affect into the interpersonal relationship with the child care provider. And then there's that sense, sort of psychologically, metaphorically speaking, like, you can push me away, but your arm is not long enough and I will still be here.
So what I do think it's interesting, and it's come up a couple of times, that the same feelings and emotions that children are exhibiting are either a reflection of or could be mirroring what parents and caregivers are thinking. And I know that talking with parents and talking with our staff, there are a lot of mixed feelings there. So I'm wondering if, Kate, if you want to talk a little bit about parents' ambivalence about coming back, as well as staff, and how we can support them both in that.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, of course people have big feelings about going back. And I think we've sort of talked a little bit about parents, but I want to focus for a moment on teachers, because I think it absolutely makes sense to me that teachers would have a lot of big feelings about this. And I think, again, they could range from having missed the little ones who they were caring for, worried, about while they weren't able to see them. And so some relief and anticipation at reconnecting, but also, maybe real worries about their own safety, the safety of their family members. Being in a situation where they're really on the front line is scary, and it makes sense that they would have a lot of big feelings about that. And I think it's interesting. My sister is a teacher, and this morning I told her I was going to be on this call, and she said, "Oh, so what are you going to say?" And I said, "Well, I'm curious, actually. Why don't I not tell you, since you're a teacher? Why don't you tell me? Like, what do teachers feel?" And she said, "Well, I think that it might be sad, actually, coming back." And I thought, well, I'm really glad you said that, because I was thinking about anxiety and wasn't thinking about sad, that things aren't the way they were, and that we're all having to make a lot of adaptations and adjustments. So I think what that really reminded me is that there's just a whole host of feelings that people might be having. So as I think about that, and I think about anxiety, as a clinical psychologist, I know that there are some things that really increase people's anxiety. COVID is kind of a perfect storm for that, because what we know is that things that make people anxious are things that are novel, that they don't know a lot about. Situations where they feel uncertain, or where they lack control, or they don't have the support that they need. And so as I think about that, it really makes me think about how critical it's going to be for our teachers, for our workforce, to feel that we're addressing each of those things and that we're aware of them, because actually those are things we can do something about to help people manage and sort of navigate their way through. Can't take away all feelings. We can acknowledge them, but then we can also think about what can we do to help support them. So in terms of novelty, I think one of the things that we need to do is make sure that we're being really transparent with, like, information. What do we know? What do we know about how this is transmitted? What do we know about how we can help kids adjust to this transition? What information do you need, and how can we help connect you to that information? Because that will help it to feel a little bit less daunting, potentially. The uncertainty, I think, is a big thing. So, we can't promise answers or knowing things that we don't have answers to all the time. So of course there is some uncertainty built into this. But what we can do, and this is, I think, I imagine something, Heidi, you think a lot about, is a real commitment to transparency, to making sure that we're going to get and give information as we have it. And that's important for teachers and for parents. Parents are going to want to know, what are you doing? And will you keep me informed? Will you let me know what it is that I need to know to feel safe about sending my child to school with you? And then the sort of last thought on that sort of point, the uncertainty, is that I really think it's so important. I'm hearing this from frontline medical workers as well, that folks are saying, listen to the people on the front line. Ask us what's working. Ask us what's not. Ask us what we need, and then make sure that people are listening and really working hard collaboratively to figure out how to address the needs that are there. Because, we're all sort of going into it with our best guess, but none of us have been in this situation really before, right? And so we're going to have to learn together. And that helps to address the lack of control, because it also helps us to think about what are the strategies, how are we using masks? How are we addressing sort of check-in, drop off and pick up, and how are we going to handle it if someone has a fever? What is that going to mean? How are we going to deal with toys or, equipment? There's guidance and there's latitude in the guidance that's been offered. And so I think really having conversations and feeling heard and feeling like you have some power to sort of think about that is going to be really important. And then finally, the emotional support. Teachers need that too. Teachers are going to need to know that we're thinking about what it is that they need to feel that social and emotional support themselves. So connecting with one another, being able to sort of connect ahead of time, planning, and then really, the emotional support. What are the employee assistance programs or the reflective consultation that is available to teachers and to administrators? Frankly, everyone's going to need this, right? So that we can all be as emotionally available to the kiddos that we care for. So I think really addressing all of those feelings is important and possible. It doesn't mean we can take them away, but by acknowledging them and addressing them, I think we can go a long way towards helping teachers hopefully feel more comfortable about engaging, reconnecting, finding the meaning and the joy and the purpose and the reconnection in their work.
And Heidi, I'm really curious, as a director, you must be giving thought to what your staff needs. I wonder if you have recommendations.
Well, one of the things that we've talked about is we're planning on opening the middle of June, but we're going to bring people back at the beginning of the month, and we normally wouldn't have 2 weeks without children, but we want to make sure there's enough time to consider things that, even that the administrators don't think of, that those people who are working with children are going to know. We can put together a change in daily routine based on, new cleaning protocols, but the people who actually are going to do it will have better opinions than we do if we give them the basic goals. So time for training, time for meeting. We also are going to have expectations for them to resume not really distance learning with toddlers, but our staff had done a great job when we first closed of reaching out and having Zoom story times or recording themselves reading books. They were extremely creative with things like scavenger hunts that you could do in your own house. And it was a variety of types of interactions, but the children and families really looked forward to it. And then when this extended so long that staff were put on temporary leave, that we had to stop that, which was really unfortunate. Many of the parents, though, continued doing it on their own, so that was really nice. But that is something that I've thought of, that we really need to resume that, especially to have kids remember, oh yeah, that's who you are, I'm going to see you again, and to say it often enough that it starts to sink in. And I've even thought of having them try masks on and show the children that, and I'm sure they've seen their parents wear them, but just because you've seen that doesn't mean that you're expecting it at school if it never happened before. So there's just a lot of stuff from, the emotional support we can give to staff, families, and children. So we do have a couple of questions that have come in that I would like to address. One of them to Prachi, which is how we can have safe physical closeness with children in our settings when, social distancing is advised.
Oh, that is such a hard question and such a thoughtful question. And I hold the tension of that question in myself, because there is this tension of social distancing to mitigate, the spread of infection, and yet the need for emotional closeness and proximity, to help children feel safe and secure. And so I'm not going to speak about this from an infectious diseases standpoint, because I'm not an infectious diseases expert. But I will say, I think it's really important that there are ways to communicate emotional nearness, emotional warmth and tenderness. So that can often be done even, I think the bottom line is, yes, it's a childcare center. We have little people, and there will be a need for physical touch. That's what young children need, and that is really the means through which their sense of safety is sort of restored and reinforced. So, we have to touch, and we have to do it in a way that is sort of safe and healthy and hygienic. I think the other thing is that there's also lots of ways to maintain that experience of emotional nearness and proximity without touch, like a soft, gentle, kind voice, scooting down to the child's level and making eye contact, allowing the child to have a favorite transitional object that they can keep at the child care center that can be clean to regularly to maintain, hygienicity. All of those things, I think, are ways of conveying sort of emotional closeness and nearness. But absolutely, I think one has to be able to provide physical nearness and comfort, because that's really one of the means through which young children regulate their affect and emotion. We just have to think about how to do it in a way that's healthy and safe.
Okay, I lost a little contact there. Is everybody else still with me? Okay, great. I think we've got time to answer maybe a couple more questions. Another question I saw was relating, I do feel like all of you have done a good job of this, but there are such different sizes and configurations of what childcare can look like. And one of the participants is asking for how this relates to a small setting in a family group home versus a bigger program. I know in our programs, we range from smaller settings in a residential facility to, bigger centers with that are divided up into wings. So is there anything, I'm not sure which one of you would want to field this. I do feel like a lot of what you're talking about was the one-on-one personal contact that can happen in any size program.
Well, I wonder, actually, Heidi, I'm curious what you think about this, given that you are thinking about it as a matter of, different scale. But things that do come to mind for me are, also questions of planning. When it's a smaller setting, I imagine that a lot of the different functions fall on one person, or a smaller set of persons, much more heavily, that you're sort of taking on all these different roles and wearing these different hats, and just wondering about resources and supports. Like, how do you get information, and who are you going to call? How are you going to get backup? Who's going to cover for you if things, need to be done? So I'm just thinking about all of the different ways that that experience might be very different in a small setting. But I'm curious, I think maybe you might be the best person here to address that.
Right. Well, one of the advantages that we have is that we have each other. So even if you're the small center director and you work in the classroom and you're responsible for all of the parent communication, you have, other colleagues. But I do know in this, this is taking place in Washtenaw County, Michigan, but I know around the country there are groups of early childhood directors and groups of family day home operators who come together regularly for support, for friendship, for professional development. And I think that would be a really important resource right now. I know that the early childhood directors group in Washtenaw County has been active. Just share, even though we're competitors, we share information and support. An advantage, I think, though, for smaller programs is that you don't have to worry about it. Naturally, you're going to have consistency in your groupings. And that's something that bigger programs, I think, have to really be intentional about, that maybe the staffing model that worked before is not going to work now, because you don't want to have different people coming in to relieve for break times. So how is the day going to be structured to relieve people, but not be introducing unnecessary adults into the classroom? So that's just one aspect of that. The other thing, just at the risk of going on, the other thing that I really appreciated, I think Julie said it, but all three of you talked a lot about just being gentle with yourself. And I think that that's something that as humans, we aren't necessarily always good at. But right now, these are really uncharted waters, and everyone needs to be gentle, not just with themselves, but with families and children and staff as we try to figure this out. So I think that we're getting down to the time where we were going to maybe do some summary and a calming exercise. That sounds wonderful. Julie, did you want to do that?
One of the things that we were thinking about in getting ready for this was the fact that we're all going to need to access those calm, quiet moments within ourselves. And when everything's moving, it might not be able to do like a 30-minute meditation or yoga practice, but we might need moments in time where we just gather ourselves and consciously calm down. So I prepared 2 different calming activities, one aimed at the teachers or parents, caregivers, to just sort of anchor oneself, and then another that a preschool teacher taught me, and you'll appreciate this. She had 10 young 5s and one who are boys and 1 girl. So a classroom of 10 young 5 boys and 1 girl, and she used this technique to help them calm down. So I'm going to offer 2. So the first I'll do is the one for us as adults, and then the other one is just to give a quick teaching of one that we can use with kids. So for us as adults, right, like it's hard to share a sense of calm if we don't feel calm. So I would invite people just to sort of take a minute, settle into their seat. And I'm going to lead you through something called box breathing, which interestingly enough, the military uses in teaching vets how to manage combat. And so not that we're in a combat situation, but we need really strong tools. So we're going to do what's called box breathing. So I'll lead us through what we'll be doing is breathing in for a count of 4, holding for a count of 4, breathing out through a count of 4, and holding for a count of 4. And we'll do that 4 different times. Okay, so as we head into that, and I'll count it and guide people through it, I would encourage you to take a seat on in your chair, put your feet on the ground. If it's available to you, close your eyes. Notice if there's any points of tension in your body and maybe just stretch it out a little bit. And we're going to take 1 deep cleansing breath in and out. And count in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, and 4. When you're ready, take 1 last breath and come back. Notice how your body feels now. Okay. And the last one that we'll do is called a pretzel for children. And I'm going to sort of try and show it to you as I might teach children, right? Because little ones, and I just have to say, I taught this to a group of kindergartners, and one little girl piped up afterwards and she said, I felt like I was floating on a cotton candy cloud. So isn't that a wonderful image, right? So a pretzel, eventually what you're going to be looking like is this, right? But you're going to cross your feet at your ankles. You're going to put the backs of your hands together, cross over, link your fingers, and then pull up through the middle. Okay, so let's see, backs of palms together, cross at the wrists, then link your fingers and then pull up. There we go, okay. And then you're gonna rest the tip of your tongue to where your teeth meet your palate, okay? And then breathe through your nose. So, and we're just going to sit here for a minute, right? So feel free to close your eyes if you want, but we're going to sit for a minute and let our bodies do what it needs to. Our body does do what it needs to do to relax. So I will keep time for a minute. Relax into this pretzel. All right. And when you're ready, come back and stretch out. Again, notice your body. So I think teachers can, and caregivers and parents can do box breathing. It probably can be taught to children as well, but the pretzel is especially good for them. And they can do that lying down, sitting up. We need to give them tools to help their body, their little bodies feel tucked in and safe as well.
Okay, I'm so relaxed. I forgot what we were doing next. Thank you. That's wonderful. So, Prachi, is there anything that you'd like to share, maybe that as the group disperses, that you want people to keep in mind?
I think my Delta Airlines view message, my view from 30,000 feet above, are just the importance of a balance and yet an integration between safety and kindness. We enact social distancing to be safe, but we also put all sorts of strategies in place for emotional proximity that feel kind and safe and supportive. And so for us to be able to do that for our children, our families, and ourselves as caregivers, I think the second point is that feelings matter and feelings are really important. And little people coming back into childcare are going to have lots of feelings that span the whole range of emotions and are going to be expressing it in different ways. And to be able to just hold those feelings with a sense of respect and to hold those feelings in a place of safety and kindness. And then also just the recognition of the importance of finding the helpers, that for the childcare providers, they are really the frontline helpers to help these little people feel safe and secure. And the importance of the helpers making sure that they feel that sense of safety and security in themselves and for themselves as well. And that the helpers really play such an important role in helping manage these big feelings in these little people and helping these little people feel safe and secure. And just reminding little ones as well as themselves that this is a process, that we are all learning through this process. We are not alone in this process, even though our feelings may feel so big and overwhelming, whether as a child or as a grown-up, that we are not alone in those feelings, and that emotionally we are all in a space where we are holding each other in mind and heart, and certainly in care.
Thank you. Kate, did you have anything that you'd like to share at the end?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, just gratitude to everyone for sharing those thoughts I learned from listening to all of you. And I'm grateful for folks who are attending and asking questions. But I'm mostly wanting to share gratitude to the teachers who are, preparing emotionally, psychologically, and practically for ways of embracing kids, both in spirit and mind, and then finding the safe ways to nurture and help children restore a sense of routine and safety. And I just want to add that I have a sense of hope about this, because if there's anything I've learned over time is that with the right sort of support, kids can be remarkably resilient. And teachers, the things that you know still matter. And Julie referenced this early on. You all are just absolutely, like if I had to lead a webinar for parents on how to help kids sort of transition through challenges, separations, anxieties, you are the people I would go to, and the things that you know still matter. Those are the things that are going to help children get through this, and help parents get through this time. And so trusting that you have all those internal resources and knowledge and experience, and that's still going to be what kids need from you. We're going to navigate, and we're going to find new routines and new ways of doing the things that we've done for a long time. And the last point I just want to make is that you really matter. So if you find ways to connect with one another in the chat box, I think there were some suggestions for different ways that people can connect. Use the ones that are right for you, reach out. If you need more, don't be afraid to ask for more. This is a challenging time, and we all want to find ways psychologically and emotionally to embrace one another, to welcome the joys and the challenges, and work together towards a future where we are connected and really enjoying and loving the children who are the focus of our care. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you to all of you. This was a wonderful conversation, and thank you for all of your work with Zero to Thrive. I think we're done now.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Everyone. Stay well.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.